Hey, Adam. Listen, Negan won't be around this week again. He's off doing a really important work in another Canadian city. But the good news is we have a really cool interview this week with Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham, who's going to tell us how he's going to open Portage and Main to pedestrians.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Listen, and I think really the only thing that we need to do in Negan's absence is I do think we need to change the name of the podcast.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Well, he's doing a lot of important work. His book is coming out this spring. He teaches at the university, and that's important work. So I don't want to take his name off it, but I do have an idea.
Okay.
Negan and the Loneliest Ranger.
Well, it has a certain ring to it.
The Winnipeg Free Press proudly presents, in partnership with CJNU 93.7 FM, Negan and the Lone Ranger. Here are your hosts, Negan Sinclair and Dan the Lone Ranger Lett.
I always get into trouble when I misuse the term irony. So is it ironic that we are today more or less beneath the intersection of Portage and Main on a day when Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham has made a rather seismic announcement about the future of Portage and Main, and that he's agreed to join us on the podcast this morning? Maybe it's just fortuitous.
It's quite the timing, quite remarkable timing. You're right, Dan, that today of all days, I'm here with you doing this podcast. But thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
No problem. So why don't you walk us through the elevator pitch on what's happened? You are now in receipt of some important information, and that has caused you to rethink your own vision for what should happen to the intersection.
The City Council, has been waiting on a report from our public service for several years, actually, on the total cost to repair the membrane, which is right underneath the intersection of Portage and Main. The membrane was put in place 45 years ago, and it basically keeps water out of the concourse, also called the circus by many. That membrane has failed after 45 years. There was an agreement in place back in 1979 when the concourse opened up and the underground opened up with the property owners in the area. It was a 40-year agreement. We're at 45 years. So that agreement has expired, and quite frankly, the infrastructure has expired as well. It's beyond its life. We've been asking for the cost to replace that membrane. We now have the cost that it would be $73 million at least to replace the membrane underneath Portage and Main.
Now, that's just for the concourse membrane.
That's a concourse membrane, and then also there's a few other elements that make up that cost, including traffic measures that would have to be put in place, because to replace the membrane, you've got to rip up Portage and Main at grade, like at the surface, in segments. And that means that we would be looking at up to 5 years of traffic construction, chaos, delays, lane closures right in Portage and Main. In light of the fact that it'd be $73 million to replace this membrane, and we'd have to do it again in 30 to 40 years, because that's how long the membrane would last, and we're looking at up to 5 years of traffic delays, that's information I didn't have in 2018. Voters didn't have in 2018 when the plebiscite happened. I did not have that information when I ran for mayor in 2022. In light of that information, I'm saying now, it's time to decommission the concourse and to open Portage and Main to pedestrian traffic.
So a couple of interesting points here. Number one is the process by which you would officially reopen the intersection. You're proposing a vote at council to get it done. So not another plebiscite. This is not really an issue of what we want. You're sort of introducing this as we need to do this, or otherwise we're going to be spending, an enormous amount of money. So no plebiscite. It'll be debated and voted on the floor of council.
No plebiscite. It becomes a council decision. I think it's the practical decision. I think if the average voter in Winnipeg had this information that we're looking at $73 million for this work, we'd have to do it again in 30 to 40 years and 5 years of traffic chaos. I think more voters would have said open it to pedestrian traffic. The timing is important as well. What I'm going to be asking our public service to do, and I'm working with Councillor Sherry Rollins to put this motion in place, asking our public service to prepare to get everything ready so that Portage and Main can be open to pedestrian traffic in the summer of 2025. That timing is important because that's also the timing that our transit master plan, the next step, is put in place, where we basically flip the switch and go from our current system to a spine and feeder system. When we go to a spine and feeder system in June of 2025, that will change the way buses go through Portage and Main, and in fact, it will be much more efficient bus routes through Portage and Main. So the timing, I think, is important as well.
So you mentioned that this is information that we didn't have back in 2018 when there was a plebiscite attached to the civic election ballot. But what we did actually know that we didn't know these things, if that makes any sense. So the forces that were campaigning for the reopening of the intersection and some prescient members of the local media were actually thundering on this point that we didn't have the final engineering. We didn't know the full extent of the damage or how much it would cost to fix things. And so that it was, at the very least, it was premature to be asking the city residents to vote on this thing. And without pointing fingers at anybody, but is that a fair comment that really 2018 was not the right time to have that vote?
I think a lot of individuals in Winnipeg for sure will be looking back, and fair to 2018 and the plebiscite, whether we should have had it or didn't. I think what is important now is that, as you mentioned, we knew we didn't have the information. Now we do have the information, and we're looking at significant price tag. And all the other things that I've just laid out a couple of times already. And so I'm asking council to look at this today in light of the information we do have today and in light of what this would mean for the future. To me, the practical and the best decision is to say, let's decommission the concourse. Let's open this to pedestrian traffic at grade. Let's make sure we work hard to do it in time for the change we're going to make to our transit system as well, and think about really the future of this intersection and our downtown and traffic movement. So this is right today. You're expressing your own view on this, informed with all the information now. You obviously, if Councillor Rollins is involved in helping to draft a council motion, we can assume that she is like-minded. So a couple of questions. Number one, there hasn't really been a discussion about this at EPC yet. And have you canvassed, though, other members of council to find out, what's going to happen? Because this isn't prescient because I think he's already said it, but I think Councillor Russ White is going to make a motion for another plebiscite. So that is one of the risks here, is you're throwing it onto the floor of council, and it could potentially go in a number of different directions. You feel confident, though, that there's the support on council to move in the direction you've outlined? I've spoken to many members of council, most of them, not all of them, but most of them. First of all, I wanted to inform them of what was happening today. At the time of this taping, that I was going to be making this announcement, and some of them, immediately said, "Look, we support opening Portage and Main to pedestrian traffic and not spending the $73 million, having to spend it again." Others said, they need some time with the report. For sure, I believe that there'll be some members of my executive policy committee that will not be in favor of opening to Portage and Main. Mm-hmm. I respect that. This is a decision that an issue that has been batted around for a long time, and people have taken positions. But I do believe that enough members of council would be supportive to approve this and to make this change to open this intersection to pedestrian traffic. So before we started the interview, you and I were talking about some of the information that floated around in 2018 that somehow was not persuasive in the debate, and information that has changed slightly. Like back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, one of the biggest
frustrations, I think, about the debate over Portage and Main was this idea that it was the biggest and busiest intersection in the city, and that throwing pedestrians across it was going to cripple, traffic. I think at that time it was the third busiest and maybe the fourth largest intersection. But you said you've gotten some new numbers now about Portage and Main.
Well, traffic actually, since the pandemic, has reduced. And so the traffic flows through Portage and Main is lower now than they were in 2018. So things have changed, and work patterns and people working downtown, that number has been reduced. And so there's this traffic. The intersection now used to be the third busiest. It's now the sixth busiest. And granted, absolutely, Portage and Main is central to our city. It has historic significance. Many Winnipeggers, in fact, have an emotional connection to Portage and Main. But at the end of the day, it's just an intersection.
It's just an intersection. And that point, nobody seemed to be able to communicate that point effectively in 2018. And I put myself into that category because that was another point that we thundered on through the campaign. I'm wondering as well too, though.
If I can add to that,
please go ahead.
We just I asked, and there are 10,000 intersections in Winnipeg. 10,000 intersections. People cross thousands and thousands of intersections in Winnipeg every day, and I think that perspective needs to be kept in mind as well. That this is an intersection.
Well, and the community around Portage and Main is about as close to a walkable community as you can get. I mean, you really can shop and recreate and, take advantage of, a wide variety of amenities and things without taking a car. So it always seemed the worst kind of irony that was the one place where you couldn't walk, at grade across the intersection.
At the press conference that I held related to this, I invited the three downtown councillors, Councillors Gilroy, Councillor Santos, Councillor Rollins, and Councillor Rollins also chairs the Planning and Development Committee. I also invited Councillor Lukes because she chairs the Public Works Committee, which deals with traffic and roads and sidewalks and transit as well. But the three downtown councillors are all in favor and always have been in favor of opening this intersection in their ward. Right, or their shared ward, so that pedestrians can cross. So
the move forward, to doing this, and you did mention it very briefly, but the other looming issue that could have really dictated whether barriers go back to Portage and Main is the Transit Master Plan, which has enormous longer-term implications for Portage and Main and for Main Street in particular. So, friend of the podcast, Free Press columnist and noted architect Brent Bellamy has been very, explicit and consistent about the fact that once the master plan, all the different parts of the master plan on Main Street and Portage and Main kick into place, it doesn't really make sense to limit surface access to that intersection. That's also did play a role in your decision making?
It very much did play a role. This in many ways, this is a matter of timing. We have the information we didn't have before. We have lower traffic volumes. We are making a major and exciting change in our transit system. We need a modern transit service for a modern and growing city. And so the timing of implementing the significant change to our transit plan will really fits with the need for us to look seriously at whether or not to keep the barricades up at Portage and Main. And to me, it just doesn't make sense at this point when we're trying to do all we're trying to do with transit and make it our city more accessible, encourage more people to use transit. Now's the time to make the decision to create, the changes at this intersection that also assist us in maximizing our transit goals.
So for those people who maybe haven't looked at the copy of the master plan that's sitting on the corner of their desk, what does if it's all fully implemented, what is the master plan? What are the implications for Portage and Main and Main Street? Because there's some pretty cool stuff.
It is. So I don't have all the details, off by heart and in memory, but what we're going to do is really think of it moving to a spine and feeder system. And so there'll be spine routes that run through Portage and Main. And that means that there'll be routes that are more frequent and more reliable. Individuals will be able to go to one of those routes. And if you don't exactly know what time the bus is coming, don't worry. There'll be one here on those main routes within 5 to 7 minutes. You're going to catch a bus. And so buses and transit service will move much more efficiently through the downtown. The plan is to take them off of Graham Avenue, which is a major bus corridor right now, and move all of those over to Portage Avenue. There'll be new bus stops put in place. And the long-term goal is to have the beautiful Via Rail station actually be part of...
At Broadway,
At Broadway, at Main and Broadway, be incorporated into being a major stop as well. I mean, that's really exciting. If folks haven't seen it or been in it, next time you're close to Main and Broadway, just park your car, walk through the Via Rail station. It's one of the most beautiful buildings we have in this city. So a new spine and feeder system, which is going to make transit much more efficient, much more reliable, much more effective. There are a lot of people for whom transit is the only means of transportation. They depend upon transit. They don't have their own car. But then there's a lot of individuals, and I'm one of them. I have the option to drive around the city of Winnipeg, but from time to time, and I try to do it frequently, I get on the bus and I choose the bus as an option. We're making other major investments in transit right now as well. We are investing in a safer transit system for our operators, our transit operators, and our transit riders as well. The biggest change that we've made this year is implementing the community safety officers, which just a week ago started on our transit buses. And they're individuals who are trained to de-escalate situations and make sure that bus operators and riders are more protected. So they're on our buses, they're around our bus stops. And the other thing we're doing as well is we're making a major investment in the PAGO system, which is the pay system, the pay box.
You're not going to continue calling it PAGO. I mean, that's a 4-letter word in the city now, isn't it? It'll have another name.
It may have another name, but this idea of going to a modern transit service, so there'll be easier ways and more ways to pay your fare. All that to say, we're making substantial investments in our transit system, and it will have positive implications for how transit buses are routed through our downtown, including Portage and Main.
So the voting results from 2018, and perhaps not surprisingly, showed a pretty stark contrast in the opinions of suburban Winnipeggers and those who live and work closer to downtown. And, so this is, I'm going to say this is a dichotomy created mostly by perception, not reality, because when you really get into the reality of it, it's as you say, it's just an intersection. It's not even the busiest intersection. It's not, it has no potential to cripple vehicular traffic flow through downtown. That wasn't persuasive in 2018, particularly for people who, I refer to as having maybe a casual relationship with downtown, an infrequent relationship. What messaging do you think you and other members of council who are going to support this motion, how can you win more hearts and minds about easing the concern over reopening Portage and Main? Because according to my ex-Twitter account, there are still quite a lot of them that fear this.
What I know about Winnipeggers is most Winnipeggers want their elected officials to make practical decisions. And the information that we have now that we didn't have in 2018, I'm confident if I took the information to anyone anywhere in the city, and said, here's the new information we have, I think that most of them, the majority, would say, well, make the practical decision. And the practical decision is now to open it to pedestrian traffic. Well, the information we have now shows that this, frankly, is the best decision for drivers. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people and I live outside of the downtown. I don't live in the downtown. a lot of the people who interact with Portage and Main are individuals who drive from other parts of the city in the suburbs. I don't think they want 5 years of traffic congestion at Portage and Main. This is a better decision for those that drive into the downtown or through the downtown as well, in my mind. And so I think this is about, quite frankly, making the decisions that we need to make that will avoid $73 million and the need to spend that money again at a higher cost in future years. That's not even considering the condition of the concrete. Our staff has said in the report that they provided to us, we should also check that out. We don't have a number on that, but we should check out the condition of the concrete.
The supports
I was going to say, exactly, in the concourse underground. So, we haven't even talked about that, but and I frankly think Winnipeggers want us to deal with this matter once for all. I want to deal with this matter once for all and get on to more, I would say, urgent and important things that we have to focus on, like safety in our community, homelessness, sewage and water treatment, housing, all of those decisions, issues that are really at the top of the file of things that we have to tackle.
So decommissioning the concourse, and for those people who maybe can't envision, but there are 4 properties that have lower level commercial retail spaces, sort of B1, we'll call it the first basement level. And they are connected by a circular walkway, sometimes called the circus.
Sometimes at the concourse. Yeah.
Concourse, which is a city-owned asset, yes?
It is. It's a city-owned asset.
And
the concourse, the circle is the city-owned asset, right below Portage and Main, as you indicated before.
Right. So, decommissioning, let's talk, because that's going to cost money.
It will.
B, what does decommissioning mean to the flow of people underground? Well, I guess there won't be flow of people underground. And maybe we can get on to, have you heard from the property owners yet about how they feel about it?
There will be a cost to decommission the concourse, and we've asked our staff for early numbers and very rough estimate, a very wide range. They said it could be anywhere from $20 million to $50 million. So decommissioning is not free. There is an investment we'd have to make, a one-time investment nonetheless. So we need more information from our public service to really refine that cost and really talk about what options are available to decommission. What does decommissioning look like? But ultimately, you're right. To decommission that circus or that concourse would mean that connection underground from one property to another property would be closed off. The businesses that are right below the B1, as you indicate, that are right below the respective properties, those could and would likely still exist. I have spoken to each of the property owners on the 4 corners in advance of the announcement that we made. Didn't want them to be surprised, and so I gave them a heads up. All of them were very supportive of opening Portage and Main to pedestrian traffic at street level. Yeah. And they have been. You're right. For sure, they understand that for the city to decommission its own property, which is the concourse under Portage and Main, would have implications for their businesses. Yep. There's no doubt in their respective buildings. So I'm not going to speak for those property owners as to what their thoughts are on the impact of decommissioning, but it would have an impact. And so people that would want to access their B1 businesses below their properties would have to go through street level.
So, and just to be clear though, like in using the biggest numbers, so it might be $73 million to do all of the direct and collateral work to replace the membrane to keep the concourse. It could be as much as $50 million to decommission and reinforce that so the intersection doesn't fall into a big sinkhole. But the real advantage of option B is that you don't have 5 years of costly and disruptive traffic interruptions.
That's exactly correct. And my office gets the calls and the emails, as do every counselor gets the calls and the emails, and fair, with motorists who get frustrated in the summertime when we have road construction. And over the last several years, I get it, they've had reason to be, because we've made record investments over the last several years in our road renewal program. There's been a lot of construction. To have up to 5 years of traffic cones and barricades at Portage and Main in different places at different time would be chaos.
So is that's the point that you hope resonates with people in all areas of the city? There's no option here that doesn't cost a lot of money. There's going to be, a lot of money spent, and we're not even talking about the cost of the transit upgrades, streetscaping or anything else that needs to be done to the top, the surface level. But that, it's clearly, it could be 50% less expensive at minimum than trying to save the concourse.
When this information was put in front of me to say, here's the cost of this option, I should say the status quo. The status quo is repair the membrane, do it again in 30 to 40 years, interrupt traffic for up to 5 years, and don't maximize what we could do with the transit master plan. Yeah. Compared to, well, if we close the concourse and open the intersection, like the 10,000 other intersections in Winnipeg to pedestrian traffic, then there will be a savings. We don't have to do it again in 30 to 40 years. And we can maximize the transit master plan, and it's better for downtown residents and businesses as well. When those two are put before me, my view is I think the practical right thing to do at this point is to make the decision to open the intersection to pedestrians, decommission the concourse. So I'm guessing that in whatever option we do choose, my dream of having a suspended observation deck above the intersection, that's not going to happen. That is not on my radar, Dan, right at this point. So okay. I'm not, I don't envision that happening. As I said, this intersection has taken up a lot of focus. Political bandwidth. For a lot of years. It's a key point of our discussion. I am not saying it's not important, but I'm really trying to look at this, if I can say, in perspective. We right now have a strong focus on the North End treatment plant and combined sewer overflows and keeping raw sewage out of our rivers. We have a strong focus on the fact that we're a growing city. We need more housing. We need more housing quickly, and the infrastructure to go with that. A strong focus right now on the fact that we still have too many people living unsheltered and living homeless. We've got too much crime that's happening right now. There's just so many things that are really, really critical at this point to focus on, and I want us to be setting our focus on that. I said it a moment ago, I want us to deal with this intersection, frankly, once for all. I think the timing for all of us is affording us the opportunity to make this decision. It was closed 45 years ago with 40-year agreements with property owners. Those 40-year agreements have expired. Now the membrane is worn out. And so we have to make a decision one way or the other. To me, let's make the decision that is practical and puts us in best stead and position for the future years. So I'm not saying that they want to, but if the four property owners got together and decided that the concourse was essential to the business plans of their properties, is there any, if they volunteered to pay the costs associated with saving the concourse, which the implication of that would be the traffic disruption, would you try to dissuade them? Would you hear them out? Like, I'm not saying that that's even economically feasible for what they want to do. I'm assuming it probably isn't, but it's an interesting scenario that if the four property owners got together and said, we want to save the concourse, would you be open to that conversation? To this point, none of the property owners have had that direct discussion with me or even floated the idea with me that they might be interested in purchasing the concourse. If private property owners wanted to come together and to purchase the concourse, at least wanted to have the conversation, yes, of course, we'd have the conversation. I think the point of the matter is what I'm trying to avoid, given the information we have now as mayor, and I'm asking council to make, obviously the same decision, is to not make an investment of $73 million, probably more, to save the concourse, and then to have to ask taxpayers to do it again in 30 to 40 years in a future generation. So that's an interesting perspective that dovetails nicely to a broader discussion
of infrastructure and effluent. For lack of a better, I had a better term, but Adam will just bleep me in the final cut.
There's only so many times I can hit that button down.
Yeah, okay. So, but the city has been somewhat transfixed by the unfettered flow of untreated sewage into the Red River, the result of a 70-year-old pipe that failed and exposed yet another pressing infrastructure need. And when you combine you mentioned North End sewage treatment, rapid transit, Portage and Main, and then the non-infrastructure things like homelessness. And so how did we get to a point where it seemed that we were surprised that 70-year-old pipes were on the verge of collapse? Is that an unfair point?
Well, in fact, the pipes were put in the 70s, so they're actually only 50 years old.
Okay.
I think that's part of the surprise, Dan. So
you expected them to last longer.
I think we did expect them to last longer. And to their credit, I think I want to take the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to remind all the listeners that the way the leak was discovered is because our staff does regular inspection and maintenance on these pipes. So these are two pipes, just to remind everyone. There's sewer pipes that go under the rivers at certain points. The sewer pipes that failed go under the Red River near the St. Vital Bridge, under kind of Abinogi-Mikina, or Bishop Grandin, as people, it was called for a long time. During a regular inspection of those pipes in November of 2023, staff discovered one of the two pipes was leaking. They closed down that pipe, moved all the flow to the second pipe, and started putting in place a bypass system. They started kind of mobilizing and going to build a bypass system. Before they could get the bypass system operating, the second pipe catastrophically failed, and we had the horrific event of 228 million liters of raw sewage, sometimes diluted, but raw sewage flowing into the Red River. I was asked once by someone else in media, how do you feel? I feel awful. Everyone feels awful. Nobody wants raw, even diluted sewage flowing into our river system and flowing into our lakes. Our staff worked very hard with the contractors to try to get that bypass system in place as quickly as possible. The bypass system requires two pumps. They put it in place. The one pump started to fail. And because the one pump started to fail, we could only use one pump for a time on that bypass system. And at peak flow periods, it couldn't handle things. So there was some spillage at peak flows. And I'm glad to say that thankfully, the second pump is fixed. The bypass system is working. There's no more raw sewage flowing into the river. That bypass system, though, is going to be in place probably till 2025, because it's going to take a year plus to replace those two pipes that go under the river. We as a city we're already, though, on track to invest billions in infrastructure for wastewater. The North End sewage treatment plant, the North End wastewater plant that we're undertaking right now is the largest, most expensive, most complex project the city of Winnipeg has ever undertaken. The price tag of that is over $2 billion. Mm-hmm. We're in the middle of the second phase, we started the second phase. Well, the second phase alone is $1 billion. We're also doing combined sewer overflow work. Just permit me a minute. What that is older parts of Winnipeg, like many other older cities,
stormwater and gray water run together.
They do,
and it creates twice the volume or more.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're separating the one pipe to two pipes, so the stormwater can go to the river and the wastewater goes to the treatment plant. We have a program that we have just ramped up. We have been investing $30 million a year, approximately, in that combined sewer overflow program. To his credit, Councillor Brian Mays several years ago said to me when I chaired finance, he said, we should really increase that. And he pushed hard and he was right. So now, as of this year, we've gone from $30 million investment to $45 million investment per year. So we're doing more to separate our sewers. Right at that bridge water crossing where the pipes failed, we are also building in the southwest part of the city of Winnipeg what's called the Southwest Interceptor, which is a massive backup valve for wastewater. That was already on the books. Work has already started on that. And so all that to say, let's be honest, it's not sewage treatment and sewer pipes are not exciting things, but they're critical. We're focused on them. We're investing billions into them.
So I'm not sure you're going to agree with the premise, but for some years, a couple of years now, I've been writing about the fact that I think that the city, in what's really been a 2-decade-long effort to ramp up spending on roads, it's been a massive increase in annual spending on roads, and as as you mentioned again in our pre-tape conversation, people are aware of it because they're stuck in traffic, watching dump trucks back up and block traffic. So the amount of road work we're doing is quite amazing. Roads get a lot of attention because people see them, because bumpy road, potholes. There's an immediate reaction with local government.
People have to take their vehicle to the shop, to replace shocks and
that's right.
tires.
I doubt you got many calls about sewer pipes until one exploded under the Red River. Is there any argument to the fact, though, that we need to moderate a little bit the amount of money that we're spending on roads? Let's say within the context of an argument that we're making slow progress in reducing the number of roads that need the attention, and shift some of that to some of the other priorities that you've talked about, because potholes are really inconvenient, but not nearly as inconvenient as being told that you can't flush your toilet. So, is there anything credible in what I've just said?
Well, before I answer, let me take the opportunity, because you raised it, to sincerely thank the residents in Southwest Winnipeg, who over the last week or so, couple weeks, when we asked them, to try to moderate the cottage rules, reduce their water flow, those that participated, I do sincerely thank you. It was obviously an inconvenience. We didn't want to do it, but thank you for helping out. The challenge and the fact is that we have an aging city, and we need both. We need investment in roads. We need investment in wastewater infrastructure. We need the investments in infrastructure. For the temporary inconvenience of road closures, at the end of the day, what motorists get, and don't forget our buses drive on those roads as well, mm-hmm. commercial traffic that moves our economy drives on those mm-hmm. roads. At the end of that construction work, you get a nice road that's good for 40 to 50 years. And people are pleased that they don't have to take their vehicle to the mechanic to replace the shocks yet again because they've hit another pothole. We need investment in our infrastructure of roads, that we have to continue to do that. But without a doubt, we need infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure and water infrastructure to also be prioritized. And we are making that investment. One of the things that is really important is that the federal government right now is focusing on housing. And I appreciate that. And we've told them we appreciate that. In fact, they've given the city of Winnipeg, they're giving the city $122 million for specifically for housing. But every house, every apartment needs a water pipe and a sewer pipe, a sidewalk and a road. So you can't have investments in housing alone without the corresponding investment in infrastructure right. that enables it. It's growth-oriented, growth-supporting infrastructure needs to be also prioritized. The North End Pollution Control Center, North End Sewage Treatment Plant, is a project that is really ultimately being done in 3 phases. The federal and provincial governments have joined the city of Winnipeg in funding that project mm-hmm. through an initial agreement. It's called ISIP, or Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. I'll call it ISIP for short. The challenge we have right now is that agreement was signed several years ago when costs were much different than they are today. In the initial agreement, the principle of this federal ISIP program is that the federal government will pay 40% of the project costs, the province 33%, the city 27%. Well, costs have gone up significantly in the last several years. We have yet to get, though I've been asking,
an agreement to...
Well, we've been an increase in funding corresponding from those senior levels of government. If we don't get that, the ratio of funding is, on the second phase alone, is going to be that instead of 40%, the federal government will only be paying 22% or 28%. Instead of 33%, the province will only be paying 19%. And the city, instead of and taxpayers or ratepayers, instead of paying 20% of the cost, 27% of the cost, we'll be paying 58% of the cost. That will mean significant impact on water and sewer rates if we don't get assistance from the senior levels.
Mm-hmm.
I was just in Ottawa earlier this week with the Big City Mayor's Caucus. I raised this specifically with one of the federal ministers. I used the North End plant as illustration of the kind of help we need, financial assistance municipalities need for infrastructure to support housing. Raised this with the Premier as well, so he's well aware of it. So that's a long answer to say you're right. Infrastructure needs to be prioritized, but wastewater infrastructure also needs to be at the top of the list.
So I'll take one more run at this, finding the right balance or mix between streams of infrastructure funding. How much is enough money on an annual basis to spend on roads? Like, so that we're making small but incremental progress in reducing the number of major and minor streets that need repair. Because I think that's a figure or a number I've been chasing for a number of years. And I talking to people at Manitoba Heavy Construction, for example, they believe that these numbers can be, we can create a number every year. It may fluctuate with inflation, but that we know we're spending enough and we're not spending too much and possibly taking money away from other worthy infrastructure needs.
The challenge to find that balance, it's a very fair question. The challenge to find the balance of how much is the right amount, of course, it depends who you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get different answers. But we can't put all of our investment in one area and starve the other. And that's why I think you mentioned the roads budget gets more focus. It has, because it's been record roads budget. And as you say, people see the traffic disruptions. They see the road work.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's seeing when we're slipping kind of a new sleeve into an old sewer pipe to improve its service and extend its life. I'm very serious about investing in the pipes underground that we have: water pipes, sewer pipes, combined sewer overflow, sewer interceptors in the North End plant. So we're really at the point where we're making record investment there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're making investment in transit is another infrastructure, transit infrastructure, whether it's buses or transit lanes and bus stops. That's also infrastructure that supports housing and growth. We're making significant investment there too. We have a transit master plan, which will be historic.
Yeah. No, and I wrote about the transit master plan, and if half of it comes to fruition, I think people should notice a lot of positive changes. I think the other issue that's come up inadvertently related to infrastructure and cost sharing was the federal infrastructure minister's comments about possibly the federal government possibly shifting focus away from big new mega projects. And now the problem was he didn't really define what he was talking about. So it led to a lot of speculation. But there is the idea is not crazy. I mean, people that are most where climate change is a top of mind concern, where they would like to see much more aggressive funding in transit, would say, don't build new roadway assets that in 30 to 40 years need massive costs of replacement. Don't build those. Fix what you've got. Improve transit. And make sure you're spending enough money on those other areas of infrastructure. So I'm not asking you whether or not that's going to kill the Chief Peguis Trail or whether the feds are not going to be involved in funding it. But seriously, there's something there about not building more than you can afford to repair and maintain in the future, isn't there?
Yeah, I heard the comment. I know the federal minister started to walk it back pretty quickly a day later, and they were working hard to provide some clarity. If it was as simple as choose one or the other,
mm-hmm.
We'd be having a different conversation. The practical reality is it's not as simple as one or the other. Both are needed. We have this focus on the fact that we're a growing city, we're a growing country, we've more and more immigration. We know we have a shortage of housing, so we're focused hard on, focused on building housing. As at the risk of repeating myself, Housing needs the corresponding infrastructure. Buses, we can work hard, and we are working hard to make sure that transit is more available for more people as a choice. Buses need roads.
Mm-hmm.
People need sidewalks. So this growth enabling infrastructure cannot be forgotten about. It's also very, very critical to provide the services and create the kind of cities that people need. We're a growing city. Not everybody is going to live in an infill house in an old neighborhood or in an apartment building or a condo that's multifamily. Some people want to and will choose to live in a brand new house in a greenfield development. We can't say we're only going to have one, invest in one and not the other. We have to invest in both smartly, strategically, doing the best to know the impact of it. We also have to keep in mind that trade is critical to our local economy. We have a huge transportation infrastructure here in Winnipeg, where we've got many trucking companies, many for whom Winnipeg is their headquarters and Manitoba is their headquarters. Our trade, flows on our roadway system. And so we need to make sure that those roadways are in good shape as well. And so I know some would like to see it just to paint it as a simple thing. Well, if we just invest in this one thing over here, it's better and it'll be better for our environment. Cities and life is just more complicated than that, more nuanced than that, and we, I think, have to take thoughtful approaches to try to be obviously good stewards of our environment, but also to grow our economy and provide the housing that in communities that people need.
I mean, a lot of this is somewhat fantastical imaginings but when we start to imagine a city that's more sustainable, so that a city has less of a future infrastructure liability, is got the size of a community, it's generating, own source revenues that can pay for infrastructure. There's an argument to be made that, the Chief Peguis Trail shouldn't be like, a 6-lane freeway. It should be a BRT, like that, that you're going to extend a BRT with feeder routes, dedicated feeder routes, so that, the vehicular traffic on Chief Peguis Trail that we have now would be less, that people would have a way of moving around. I would say, though, that the Transit Master Plan, I'm a big fan. Yeah. But I think that debates about things like the Chief Peguis Trail and transit seem to be conducted on two sides of the civic government brain, where, it's not, and we're not really... Because I'm not sure that I see how extending the Chief Peguis Trail makes us more sustainable.
The idea of the caution you mentioned to make sure we're not having these conversations separately in silos. Transportation Master Plan, which is right now getting updated. We don't have it now. Transportation Master Plan and the Transit Master Plan shouldn't be spoken of in isolation, separate from. I agree with you. Absolutely agree with you on that. What an extension of the Chief Peguis Trail could ultimately look like, for sure, should be and could be open for discussion. But keep in mind, one of the things that we're focused on is, as we talked about, making transit more available for more people. We're moving to electric buses. Yeah. So we're treating wastewater in such a way to protect the lake. So we absolutely have our eye on sustainability and our environment. Not only that, I mentioned a moment ago the housing money we got from the federal government, the $122 million. The first tranche of it we received, $30 million. The focus is going to be building along corridors next to transit lines, multifamily, affordable housing. So our first investment of that funding goes towards sustainability and accessibility, and trying to say let's do infill here on mall parking lots, which are big pads of concrete. Should be housing on those. I campaigned on it. We should have more housing on mall parking lots. We should have more housing on corridors. And as far as future investments like the Chief Peguis Trail, which I still believe we need to do, but how we do that and what it looks like, I think is certainly open for discussion.
So how we do that and what it looks like, is that one of the reasons why it wasn't mentioned in the budget, the proposed budget that was tabled, is that there needs to be, not maybe reimagining is too strong, but you need to consider all possible options for what that might look like.
The reason that Chief Pavers Trail project extension is not in the budget, as well as the Kenaston Boulevard projects, plural, because there's many there. People keep talking about it being widened. Widen's only one of several projects there, including the replacement of an old bridge.
Yeah.
Right?
That has to be replaced.
Right. Think Arlington. We have old infrastructure. St. James Bridge is an old bridge that needs to be replaced. The reason that Chief Pavers Trail extension and the Kenaston projects were not in the budget is because we are waiting on reports back from our staff that will provide updates in the cost of all of those projects and basically the return on investments of those projects as well.
Right. Okay. I should mention that it's not all, raw poop and, infrastructure woes and whatnot, that it's also Winnipeg 150 this year. So this is the 150th anniversary of the establishment of the Winnipeg Charter.
The City of Winnipeg held its first council meeting on January 19th, 1874. So we're 150 years as a city this year in 2024.
And wow.
Dare I even ask? 150 years since Winnipeg itself held its first council meeting, 53 years since Unicity. Is this emblematic of aging infrastructure?
I think that may be the case. I remember, quick story, when I served on council for 2 terms before becoming mayor, served as the councillor of St. James, which has some very old houses, some old infrastructure. There was a water main break, and I asked the staff, how old is this pipe? And they said, 80 plus years, right? So we do have aging infrastructure in some of our old communities without question.
Mayor Scott Gillingham, thanks for being here. This is your second appearance on the podcast. After I punch your frequent podcasting card, you'll be one punch short of becoming officially a friend of the podcast.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If you get 2 more punches, you get to guest host.
Yeah, that's right.
That could be dangerous.
We just give you the microphone and let you talk about whatever you want. No, I really appreciate you being here today. It's an important day. And last, will Portage and Main reopen? Yes or no?
Yes, it will.
Okay. There you have it. Not here first, but definitively here. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Huge thanks to Mayor of Winnipeg, Scott Gillingham, for taking the time to join us here, almost beneath Portage and Main. I think we're technically underneath the circle in front of the Fairmont Hotel. Other hotels are, of course, available, but that's the one we're beneath. And it was really exciting to get to hear from him, his perspective, but I think also his convictions in making this issue, in some ways, a non-issue, as he looks more holistically at what the city are trying to do.
Yeah, the most important word he used was practical.
Yeah.
When he was elected as Winnipeg mayor, I dubbed him, I don't think it's caught on with anybody, but I dubbed him the mechanic because I thought he was a details guy. He was a nuts and bolts guy, and the implication being that he was more practical than partisan. And I think he's really showing that with this, decision to sponsor a motion to reopen Portage and Main. I do think it'll be a cue to some of the less stable members of council to go on rants for another plebiscite. I'm sort of hoping that the rest of council somehow, maintains its sanity. And although I will say that, like, back in the day, way million years ago, when I was a City Hall bureau chief, a friend of mine who worked for CBC Radio told me that City Hall was the intellectual free zone.
That seems slightly mean, but I can just about see it.
Yeah, possibly mean, but potentially accurate, depending on what happens with the mayor's motion to reopen the intersection. Anyways, thank you to you, Adam, who helped out with Niganoff doing important author, academic work. And thank you to CJNU, Thank you as well to editor Paul Simin and the Winnipeg Free Press for continuing for some reason to allow us to do this. And to everybody who's got the time to tune in and follow us, Miigwech, thank you. And we will see you again in the very near future.